Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another Art House Rewind. My name is Matt, and tonight, as always, I'm joined alone this evening by our creative director here at Art House, Brian Oestreich. Brian, good to
Hello.
see you, my friend. So, everybody, we're so excited to talk about the film that we're talking about tonight. But before we jump into it, we need to let you know that this is the last Art House Rewind for the foreseeable future. We, as Art House, are allowed to open here in Montana because of the governor's orders that came out last week. And so we've been working hard to make sure that we have a safe plan to make this thing happen. And we are so excited to be able to screen films coming up. So just want to let you all know that more and more information is going to be coming out about that in the coming days. But this upcoming weekend, we are going to kind of do a soft open and have a film screening that we'll talk about at the end of tonight what that film is. But it's going to be for members only. So if you are an Art House member, we just want to see you and hopefully have the opportunity to connect with you on some level in a safe and socially distanced environment as we enjoy a film together. So all that to say, we've been doing this in the midst of being shut down, and we're ramping up, and we got a lot of things to do. So this is going to be our last foreseeable rewind. If for whatever reason you want to see more of these or you miss these, those kinds of things, by all means, reach out. We love to hear from anybody that's enjoying these things to figure out how we can continue to serve our community with more film, art, and culture. All right, so tonight, as always, we got to shout out our sponsor. Many of you know that we continue to be supported by so many great businesses, organizations, and individuals in the Billings area that are supporting our work here in Billings. And tonight we want to highlight somebody who is very near and dear to us at Art House. In fact, he's on the board, and so he's kind of my boss, our boss, if you will. Corby Skinner is somebody that has been involved in Billings art and culture for years and years and years and years, and we're so honored to have him and his insight, not only as a part of our board, but he has come on as a sponsor as well to make sure that he can continue to support the work that we're doing. So if you've been in a theater before, whether it's Art House or the Babcock, you've probably seen one of his pieces of art that changes out every once in a while, that he's kind of showcasing that work that he's doing and also supporting Art House. So Corby, thank you, my friend, for all that you continue to do for
Absolutely.
us and for this community. And Brian, you got to talk about what you're drinking tonight because it does tie into
Oh,
this film.
I've always got a tie-in. So
This is the last time I have to hear you talk about
this is
what
the
beer you're
last time. Well, I mean, we can talk privately about
drinking. Okay.
about what I'm drinking, which is always. But
Yeah, exactly.
so tonight I am drinking a Hops Matter hazy IPA from Thirsty Street. Hazy IPA, also known as a Northeast IPA. And of course, we are talking about Manchester by the Sea, which takes place in Massachusetts, Northeast. There we go.
There you go.
I have to get
Geography
there
lesson.
somehow.
It was good. So grab your Kleenex boxes, everybody, because we're talking about Manchester by the Sea this evening. And this is one of those films that when we started talking about doing these rewinds, it was at the top of our list that we should probably talk about this film at some point. And I think you're going to discover why we feel like we need to talk about it. But before we jump into it, Brian, tell us, or tell me, I guess, since
Yeah.
I'm the only one on it tonight, would you tell me about this film and what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. So we are, of course, talking Manchester by the Sea. This came out in 2016. It was directed by Kenneth Lonergan, who's only done a few films. He only has directed You Can Count on Me in 2000, Margaret in 2011, and Manchester by the Sea in 2016. And besides his directing, he is mostly a writer. He's hasn't even done a whole lot of writing projects. Some of his bigger titles was he was one of the screenplay writers of Gangs of New York. He's recently done a TV miniseries adaptation of Howard's End. His first writing credit that I saw was he wrote 2 episodes of Doug. But
Oh,
and then
wow.
another one of his big ones was writing Analyze This, which was later, had a spin-off sequel off of that as well. But yeah, considering Manchester by the Sea, it's sort of a strange array of different projects he's taken on. So yeah, interesting guy. This stars Casey Affleck, of course, is sort of the main character. Also Lucas Hedges, Kyle Chandler, and Montana's own Michelle Williams, if you didn't know, Matt. Michelle Williams comes from Kalispell, so always good to see Montana connection in these films.
Yeah, the cast in this film is unreal. Not necessarily heavy hitters when it comes to names, but heavy hitters when it comes to performances. Like
Yeah.
everybody in this film it's such heavy material that it could have easily swayed to someone just trying to chew up the scenery and be that guy or girl, but it always feels rooted in reality, and so much of that is the cast and what they're bringing to their performances. So I love it. So we brought this film to Art House. We were so excited to have it shortly after it opened wide. We got it in January when it came out in December, but we got it right in the midst of all of the awards season buzz. And so because of that, and because we were the only place in Billings showing it at the time, this film blew up on us. And we were so excited that it blew up on us because it felt like, again, one of those reasons why Art House is here in Billings, so that we can see these films in the midst of what's happening culturally around the rest of the country and feel like we get to be a part of it. And so we just had full houses all the time. And at the end of the day, this film is the second highest grossing film for Art House. It is number 2 all time in the last 5 years, which is pretty crazy. And it's pretty crazy to me to think back on, like, okay, our second most popular film ever was a packed theater with everybody crying together for 2 hours. And that's what we did I think we held this for 3 to 4 weeks. It was just, one that just continued to play so well because of all the buzz around it. And I don't know that it's not necessarily an enjoyable film as you watch it, but it's a powerful film that you talk about a lot. And so we saw a lot of friends talking to friends and people coming and checking it out. So all that to say, when it came to talking about rewinds and films we wanted to go back and talk about, this was one of those that deserves a lot of discussion, and it has a special place in the Art House history museum for us to be able to chat about it tonight. So we're going to jump into the spoiler-free section and start talking a little bit about this film. So if you haven't seen the film, our work in the next couple minutes, I think, is to try and tell you a little bit about what it is that you might choose to check it out, some of the production tidbits behind it as well. So Brian, I'll throw it to you first. What do you find interesting about this film? What do you think people need to know about this film when it comes to how it was made?
So one of the first things that I think really stands out when you watch this film is the editing style of the film, in that it kind of, what they call sort of a unannounced flashback will occur, where it just kind of cuts to this scene, but it doesn't give you a whole lot of indication that this is a flashback. It kind of jumps around in time without, there's no like long dissolve, there's no like little card saying like 3 years earlier or anything. Like it just kind of jumps into these flashbacks, and it takes you a little time to recognize that it actually is one. I mean, I know even this second time watching it, I had forgotten about the editing style, and I was like, wait a minute, oh, that's right. So it's it can kind of catch you off guard, but it kind of rewards you the more you watch, or even just the longer you get into the story, the more you start recognizing, what's past, what's present, and it's real interesting, and it's very effective in this particular story of, someone that is kind of living in the past anyway, so that it's really powerful in that sense.
Yeah, I feel like it's a film that does a great job of trusting its audience to think. So many films, I think we've seen a lot of films that exposition is something that's brought because it's just cheap, easy storytelling to say, this guy come, however you choose to do that. And a lot of times flashbacks can just be that, cheap exposition to the grander story, to try and build something up. And this never felt cheap. It always felt like, the director is trusting the audience to come along with these flashbacks and put their brain on and try to figure it out. But it also, there's some films, particularly in the indie art house world, that, can trust their audience to put their brain on, and you really got to put your brain on, and you really got to think, and you have to like get an Excel spreadsheet and map it out, like, okay, so this is connected to this, and just to figure out what's going on in some of these films. Which,
if anyone really wants some homework when they watch a film, put on Looper. Is it Looper? No, Primer. Excuse me, Primer.
That's Primer. Okay. The Looper, somewhat, but okay.
Somewhat, but yeah, that's a little more sci-fi
Yep.
friendly, at
That
least
that is
where
a film with exposition where he's talking about what. Yeah. So good example. Either way, all that to say, this film, like, I feel like it just he did a great job as the writer and as the director of really trusting the audience to think this through. But it wasn't, you didn't have to, hurt yourself to try and figure out what was going on. You just had to think and process it. And I think it played in really well to the story that's being told and what's happening. And we'll get into that in the spoiler section. But
yeah,
I agree
absolutely.
with you. I think it's edited really, really well and just done beautifully. This film, I was surprised. I didn't know this when we brought it to Art House, which is doing some research afterwards. This film actually comes from the mind of Matt Damon and John Krasinski. Did you know that?
Oh,
That they sat down with the director and was like, "Hey, we know you're a writer. What do you think about this?" And really pitched him this idea. And then he took it and wrote it. And originally, Matt Damon was going to star in and direct the film,
huh.
but because of him being tied up in different projects and it just continuing to get pushed back and back and back, it was just decided to cast Casey and just let him direct as well. So it's just interesting that John Krasinski is a part. So he's an executive director or executive producer, excuse me, on the film as well. Because of that,
Yeah.
so it's an interesting way in how a movie came to be. You never know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did not know that. So that's quite interesting.
So I
Were
think the
they
film does
all
a good,
just in Boston Harbor, parking the
probably.
car?
That is how I imagine it. Exactly. Yeah. And speaking of that incredible accent you have, I think this film does a good job of really centering itself in a location. You feel like you're a part of. You understand where it's at, and it's not just because of accents, like the way that it's shot and those kinds of things. You get a sense for life in that area of the country, even though I've never been there. You get a sense for kind of that fishing life and what he grew up in and around and those kinds of things. So it does a good job, I think, of that. So Manchester by the Sea is a good title for it
Yeah,
because that's where it is. Yeah. So,
it's exactly. It's right on point. So,
thank you.
other
Anything
things of
else?
note, production-wise, was it did win the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay the year it came out. It was also nominated for Best Director, but did not win that year. I don't know who it lost to. I should have looked that up, but
Was it Moonlight? Barry Jenkins?
possibly, yeah.
I think it might have been. And then Casey Affleck won for Best Actor because of this film as well.
Oh, okay.
It's a thing. It's kind of been shoved back because of all the Me Too stuff that came out around that, and so
Yeah.
he's gone through the ringer on that, but he did win technically. So and I think he's phenomenal in the film, so it
Yeah,
makes
he
sense.
does. He's very good at being an understated best actor in that instead of some big flashy accent or something. He just plays it very naturally, and it's super powerful. So.
Yeah, I think he does a great job, and we'll talk about that when we get in the spoiler section. So this film was shot in 32 days, which is pretty fast. It's pretty speedy, I think, but they definitely made it happen, and it's got just the last thing I would say is it's got a very slow pace to it, but I think it pays off in the end for the slow pace that it has. You experience things differently because of the pace of how they choose to go about things, I think. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely, without getting into spoilers again, but some of the emotional moments sometimes are downplayed and then are played larger in other areas, which is another unique thing about this film is how natural it feels, where sometimes we don't recognize we are in such a strong benchmark of our life, or something that is going to have a profound effect on us while we're in it. We recognize it later, though, and those are the way that it kind of plays with that is quite interesting.
I think that's a really, really good point, because I think then when so I agree with what you're saying, that some of the most profound or significant moments in our life are not these grandiose, emotional, over the top things that we're experiencing or
Mm-hmm.
having interactions with others. And at the same time, I would agree with that from the standpoint of, because there's so much that is, slower and not downplayed, but just, I would say, more natural on a lot of levels,
Yeah.
where the actors could definitely be bringing a lot more emotion, and everybody watching it would make sense. Like, well, of course you're acting like that. Of course you're that upset or whatever
Yeah.
it is, but they didn't. And because of that, when there is those ramp ups in emotion and the actors turn it on, it's so much more earned and deserved, on so many levels, that I think you feel it deeper. At least I did, because
Yeah.
of it, especially the first time I watched it. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
All right, so jumping into the spoiler section. So if you haven't seen the film, you can go check it out. I think it's definitely worth a watch and checking it out,
Yep.
because it really is, as Brian mentioned, the editing style and the storytelling way that they go about things is just, I think, really, really well done, and it's so beautifully acted. Just check it out on that level,
Yep.
because it's really,
Amazon
really well
Prime, if
done.
anyone's wondering.
There you go. So, Brian, best scene or moment for you in this film?
Oh, um, there's a lot of great scenes in this. It's hard to really um, pick out some because there's certain moments that are great, but I think there's also I think everyone, the scene that everyone kind of highlighted was the last scene with Michelle Williams and Casey Affleck, and they kind of have their big uh, airing out of laundry and stuff. That was, I mean, of course, an amazing scene, but I think one of the scenes that I think really I related to deeper was what is it? Maybe three-quarters of the way, two-thirds, three-quarters of the way through the film. After we're in spoiler section now, so
Go for it.
Casey Affleck's brother dies, and he comes back to Manchester to help bury his brother, but also the handling of the estate. And part of that is that his brother left his son, his nephew, he wants him to be his guardian, and you can already see this dynamic between the two, where this son, who's like 16, is, he's not having the emotional effect that you expect. Like, it's, he learns that his father dies, and then he immediately is like, can I have some friends over and stuff? Like, it's not quite the gut-wrenching thing you expect until a good way into the film. He has this panic attack when he opens up a freezer and a bunch of chicken falls out, and as he's trying to put it back, and he's trying to close this freezer, and then he just has this panic attack and doesn't even really know what's happening. But the way that they handled that, and the way Casey Affleck comes and tries to say, like, do you need me to take you to the doctor? Like, what do you need me to do? Like, that to me felt the most relatable to me, where it's just, it comes like a train, where you don't expect, like, you've been pushing it aside or whatever, you've been pushing these emotions away, and then they just kind of all come crashing down and set off by something that you wouldn't even necessarily expect to set it off, and then you just kind of collapse.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the few times when Casey Affleck shows, like, genuine concern, like he kicks in the boy's door and says, like, I'm sitting here with you just until you're fine. So
Yeah, I think that, so, this film is not only well acted, not only well shot and edited, but is such, the power of this film, I think, is not the fact that it's sad and people die in the movie.
yeah.
It's not even what happens, as far as, it's incredibly tragic, whether it's him losing his brother or Casey Affleck losing his kids in the film because of, his mistake. Um, it's how the film puts all of those things together and showcases this real experience and process of grief, and mourning and what that looks like. And that scene, I agree, it's so powerful because that's so much how many of us walk through grief. We're fine, we're fine, we're fine until we're not fine, and we don't even know why we're not fine. And I think that there's that the setup for that powerful scene is the conversation about burying his body. They can't bury his body because the ground is frozen and it's a historic cemetery, which is a real thing in that area of the country. And so there's this setup for it, but then it's not a payoff, but it definitely, you're invested and you understand, like, he's in a freezer and all of a sudden that's what comes out is I don't want my dad to just stay frozen till we can bury him. I want to bury him. And so I agree. I think it's an incredibly powerful scene. I think, the way that Casey approached that scene. So that scene was actually filmed at 1 a.m. in the middle of the night with that kind of raw emotion and stuff like that. That was a choice and a decision that they made to just kind of get it as raw and intense as they could. And I agree. I think it's an incredibly powerful scene for sure. So I think for me, we talked about the flashbacks things, and I think the reason the flashbacks again are so powerful is it's that experience of grief. The flashbacks help with understanding the story. Yes, you're putting pieces together. You got to put your brain on and understand these things. But the flashbacks are told in such a way, whether he's at the hospital and he's having flashbacks to when he was at the hospital when his brother was diagnosed, these kinds of things. The flashbacks are always experienced in a way that I think grief is potentially experienced for a lot of people. And that is, you're just going about your day and all of a sudden you're there, you're remembering what happened. And it's beautifully put together that things kind of slowly unfold. You understand, because in the beginning of the film, Casey's character, Lee, he just kind of seems like an asshole. He's just like, who did, like, what is your problem, dude? You go to a bar just to pick a fight? Like, come on. And over the course of the film, you begin to, okay, yep, I can see, I can understand who this guy is on some levels. And so all that to say, for me, one of my favorite scenes, I got two. One of them is a flashback, and the flashback when Casey is in or Lee is in the police station being interviewed or interrogated about what happened, and with his kids dying and the house on fire. And I think it's just a really, really well done scene on a lot of levels. There's a connection of his brother being out, Patrick is there. He's out in the police station. So there's that continual intimacy that you're seeing that these two had, even though it doesn't feel like they were the closest, like these two have walked through hard things together. So there's that camaraderie there. And I think Casey Affleck does an incredible job. And walking out of the interrogation room, grabbing a police officer's gun, and again, it's another surprise. It's a ramp up in emotion that you don't expect, comes out of nowhere. But because the rest of the film, as you said, is so subdued, it makes sense, and you're in, and you kind of ramp up. You're ready to ramp up with them in a lot of ways. So that would be my, I think a really, really powerful scene, because again, it ties into that flashback why he is the way that he is on some levels. The other one that I would say, go ahead.
And in that scene as well, we listen to this confession that he's giving, and he's, all this stuff, and then for it to end with, okay, you can go home now, sort of thing, because the guilt that he feels for himself, he feels like he needs to go to jail, like he needs to be put away, that he is this monster, and to more or less go through all that and then to just almost be anticlimatically like, and then nothing happens, is almost even worse on him, that he just feels like he needs this punishment, and that's why he punishes himself.
Which is, I mean, it just ties into and explains so much of the film, because even like I remember when I watched it the first time, like just it's almost comical for me at least, and maybe this is my sick nature, but like I chuckled when he leads into things like, we had some beers and we had some cocaine, and the police officer's like, "You got cocaine?" He's like, "Yeah." Like he's literally laying it all out there, trying to build a case against himself, rather than and those kinds of things that it just ties into. This is this is why he is where he is, and even as people, that Michelle Williams scene that you mentioned is the most powerful scene in the film for a lot of people that critics kind of point at, his inability to move past, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not, I don't know, I think it's the beauty of what this film is. It's not he's an idiot and he just needs to move past it. The film does a great job of like, he can't move past it. He can't, which is what he keeps saying to her, like, I just can't. And where he says it to the nephew too, like, I just can't get past this. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe someday he will. Who knows? The
Yeah.
film doesn't resolve that. So I think it's just really, really well done when it comes to grief and all that.
Yeah.
The other one for me that I loved, which is just a small little scene, but has some comedy to it, but I think is so, at least in my experience, so centered in reality of what mourning and grieving looks like. It's when Lucas Hedges and his friends are all sitting around right after his dad has passed, and they get into the argument about Star Trek.
Oh.
And his girlfriend, it's one of his girlfriends, is there trying to get everybody to be serious and like, can't you see this guy's mourning, all those things. But like, Lucas's character just continue, like, he leans into the humor, he leans
Yeah.
into the goofball, and like, for me, in my experience of grief, like you say, it's those smaller moments sometimes that you remember more than the big peak moments sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're just hanging out with family after something tragic has happened, like, you just find those moments, you remember those moments of just complete silliness, but it's just a moment that gets you out of it. And I think that film just did a great job of, I was totally bought in. I was like, yep, I totally get what's happening here, and this is not just playing for laughs, this is a thing, and I'm in on it. So I really
Yeah.
love that scene. Maybe
Yeah.
it's my love of Star Trek as
Around that
well.
same scene, one of my favorite moments as well is when Lucas Hedges comes up to Casey Affleck's room and says, "Hey, my girlfriend's gonna stay the night. Is that okay?" And normally we tell her mom that she stayed downstairs. Like, is that all stuff? And he like kind of lays into this, and you can see that Casey Affleck is like kind of in this sort of quandary where it's like, I don't know whether I'm supposed to parent you or not right now. Like,
Yeah.
and not sure, like, and he even says, like, am I supposed to tell you wear a condom or something? Like,
Yeah.
it's just, and I can almost relate to that too, where like, if my adult nephew came up to me and said to do this thing, I would almost be like I don't know what the right thing to do is, so I'm just gonna do whatever you say.
So I have a 5-year-old son, and we'll have Andrew start calling you Uncle Brian, and asks you. I'll just have him ask you all the important questions of life, so you
For
can
sure.
experience
Yeah.
it. But I think that there's something to that. Again, when you watch it the first time, there's this experience of like, what's Lee's problem? Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, just talk to the kid. Like, his dad just died. But by the end of the film, like, I was totally bought into the fact that this guy is has completely killed himself in his ability to parent
Mm-hmm.
because of the tragedy that he caused. Like, he really believes he is incapable and undeserving of being any sort of guardian or voice of any sort of reason, in any young person's life, or anyone's life, probably on some levels, because of what he experienced. And so again, that for me was one of those moments of like, come on, dude, like, you could be the cool uncle if you wanted to,
Yeah.
but instead you're this weird, awkward uncle that's totally disengaged from this conversation when you have this kid that's a teenager that's trying to talk to you about sex. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you can have honest dialogue about this, but again, by the end of the film, I was like, yep, he's completely dead to that, and doesn't think he has anything to offer.
Yeah.
Any nitpicks for you? Things that didn't work?
It's not really like
The perfect film? It's the
the
perfect
perfect
film for
film.
Brian Ostrike?
Yeah, of the things that really kind of stood out to me, and I wouldn't even call them nitpicks. They're just things that I just don't understand. Were things like you said, like going to the bar and picking a fight. Like it happens several times within the film where these fights break out, and part of me feels like it's a lazy way of saying like, oh, this is a broken man. But then there's also part of me that's like, I just have never really personally witnessed or anything where a fight can break out that easily. Maybe
Yeah.
it happens, and people always talk about Boston being the place where it happens too. So maybe I just am naive of that sort of lifestyle, but it was
Yeah,
always
I
something that
don't think
to
it
me it just
happens
felt a little lazy.
I don't think it happens at Thirsty Street or craft breweries very often.
No,
I,
probably
I,
not. But
I don't think it probably happens much just here in our
I've
region.
seen one
Um,
fight break out, and it almost felt like a cartoon. I was like, this isn't real.
yeah, no, I can understand that. For me, I'm leaning into the area of the country and believing that there's a culture around that. And Casey's always the one that's thrown the first punch.
Yeah,
So it makes sense that if somebody's going to throw a punch, someone's going to throw a punch back, particularly late night in a bar after there's been drinking. So I was in on that. So I think for me, the nitpick that I would have, and I've been thinking about it all day because I knew that I was going to talk about it tonight. It's still a nitpick, but it's not a nitpick that I know how I would fix. And that for me is the soundtrack. I don't think everything is bad. I'm not trying to say the soundtrack as a whole is awful. There's just some scenes where they use more of the classical style music that, to be honest, I'm not quite sure what. I understand it's a serious film. I understand it's
hmm
a heavy film. I didn't want a Quentin Tarantino, song popping
no,
in, needle drop moment. I'm not looking for that. Um, it just felt like I would, maybe it's just where I'm at, but I was invested so much both times when I watched the film. I was invested so much. I didn't feel like the music was investing me more
yeah,
or having me emote differently or more. It
yeah,
almost became a distraction because it was this
yeah.
like weird
Yeah,
classical
specifically
music.
that police room scene. I remember the music swelling to this point, and it almost seemed almost too melodramatic, that it seemed
Mm-hmm.
almost comical to a point where it's like, it didn't need that to make it emotional. It almost seemed like it was
Yeah.
trying too hard, or soap opera moment sort of thing.
Yeah, and maybe that's what I was feeling too. Like it was trying too hard. I just think the acting, editing, everything is so well done that just I didn't need it. Not and that this is where I don't know what the answer is. It's not like I don't want any music in those. I
hmm
think I just would have been totally okay. I think if the soundtrack had taken a little bit more of a backseat to some of those scenes and allowed those scenes to just be what they are. But maybe they tried it and it didn't work, and so that
Yeah.
they went with the way that they did. But that was the only thing for me that didn't really connect both times that I watched it. So yeah.
Yeah.
What's it all about for you, Mr. Ostrike? Any thoughts on anything
Um,
outside of what we talked about, or just adding to what we talked about?
I think a major theme of this, as we kind of touched on, is just the effects of grief on the psyche. Is what they're trying to get at, is the way that you know different ways that people carry grief, people express their grief. I think a lot of it is a strong study in grief, and learning to move past it. And even though we see Casey Affleck, doesn't have a huge change, but towards the end, I mean, in his own way, his small gesture of, I'm going to get a new apartment that has a second bedroom so that you can come over, is his small way of saying, like, I am open to having you in my life. You know, even if it's that small, that's his way of opening up and saying that, you know, I'm taking a baby step towards moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that so obviously the grief piece is the most prominent thing, um, and again, I think this film does beautifully in creating some real world
mm-hmm.
connection to grief and processing that. I do think this was probably more the second time I watched it, um, but I think the film does a good job of just kind of referencing and pointing at the depth of the human life, and what I mean by that is, everybody has a story. Everybody has so many things that lead into why you are where you are, why you think the way you think, the decisions you made, all those kinds of things, and our propensity within our humanity to just believe that we have depth and we have a story and nobody sees or understands our story, and then we don't care to see or understand someone else's story and just see them as some obstacle or whatever, to what we want in our own story. And I think this film did a good job. Like everybody's going through a process in this
Yeah.
film, whether it was Lucas, whether it was his mom, whether it was Casey's ex-wife. Like everybody is still growing and going through a process and has a depth to their
Mm-hmm.
story that I think was all real and believable on a lot of levels, um, but did a good job of highlighting that. Like
Yeah.
nobody is just a character piece to just
Mm-hmm.
move the story along. Everybody felt real and has that, and I think that ties into this idea of processing grief. Like that's a big process of understanding that we all have a story. We all
Mm-hmm.
are going through this and working through this. And that Michelle Williams scene at the end is an example of that. Like she's still processing and going through so much, and needs to sit and talk with Lee to get some of these things off her chest, even though he wants nothing to do with it. Like there's a depth to her character there. It's not just this raw emotion, but I could connect with and understand that. So I think the film does a great job of kind of highlighting that. And second watch through for me, that was definitely a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was another scene that you know it both seemed unnecessary but also quite interesting. Was the Lucas's mom scene with Gretchen Mol and Matthew Broderick as his mother and stepfather, and
Mm-hmm.
again, if that scene weren't in there, I don't think anyone would miss it. But it was another character study of this woman that you can see is doing better than when we had seen her earlier, and everyone has kind of written her off, much in the same way people have written off Casey Affleck's character as well in Manchester. And then you can see that when he did come to visit her, it did set her off. That it just kind of, as well as she was doing, it just kind of, a little bit of relapse from those emotions as well. So it was, yeah, another powerful scene of the film that, not super direct to what the main story is, but a nice little added scene there. And
Yeah, I think that the film isn't interested, because this film, it could have still been powerful and taken out scenes like that,
yeah.
taken out some of the more slower methodical stuff and just kind of move the story along. It's over 2 hours long, so I mean, there's probably space to do that, but the film doesn't seem to be interested in. I think there's some small character development and growth, as you mentioned, but it really is small.
Yeah.
It's allowing you to experience and walk with the character through something more than it is telling the story that ties up nice, neat little bow, or even offers. I don't know that there's even much hope offered by the end of the film. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they're going fishing,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. Like, yeah, there's this that he's able to find joy in the present,
Mm-hmm.
connected to where he found joy in the past. I think there's something to that, yes, but it doesn't mean that everything's okay. It just is him continuing to go through things. So I agree. I think that scene with his mom and Matthew Broderick is great, because it's showing what the film is concerned with, and that is just allowing us to experience what this looks like when we all carry
Yeah.
a story and grief and are processing
Yeah.
different things. So yeah.
Yeah. But the film, I mean, it is an incredibly realistic film in the way that it depicts these moments as well, where, another scene that really kind of was interesting in the way they did it was when Casey Affleck comes to hockey practice to tell Lucas Hedges that his father's died, and the camera, like, Lucas Hedges skates off to Casey Affleck, and the camera stays with the boys in practice, that it doesn't, it doesn't go to where that emotion is. It's more of, we're just in the background of this story. We know what's being said. We know what's being emoted, but it's just the way that it just kind of lingers in this way, as if we're someone in that hockey practice of, like, this is a moment that has huge impact on Patrick, Lucas Hedges' character's life, but we are the observer. Same as if, we recount to a friend, like, I remember being there when you got the news that your parents got divorced or something. Like, that's how we witnessed it, and the the different ways that they kind of pull back from the major emotions, but then we see Lucas Hedges' real emotions later in that freezer scene.
How would you invite people to go deeper if they want to go deeper?
I didn't really have much for this. I will go as far to say that, and maybe it's just me, but as someone that really likes a good art film, that likes a really sad film, this one didn't hit me as hard, and I almost feel like a bad person for saying that. But it's like, I'm not. It's not that I'm not the kind of person that's like, oh, I'm too tough, I don't get emotional over a movie. It's like, no, like, Blue Valentine wrecks me. Eternal Sunshine will wreck me. A Ghost Story with Casey Affleck wrecked me. But this one, it's like, it's hitting these notes, and yet for some reason I'm just like, and it doesn't bring the waterworks like other films do. So I guess if you want other films to cry to, I listed a couple just now.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I don't think that this film was a waterworks film for me at all. And even watching it after my brothers passed away, like, I was interested to watch it and be like, all right, how are you going to do, Matt? And I was really interested that it wasn't a waterworks experience for me. It had some emotion, obviously, to it, but for me, I know that for a lot of people that watched it at Art House, this was an incredibly intense, emotional experience. For others, they just walked away and was like, man, that was a downer. And that's all they could see out of it. And then there were some, I think, that were able, as our conversation has been around, they were able to see what was happening from a storytelling standpoint and the connections to reality behind that storytelling standpoint. That it's not just a downer for downer's sake. It's really trying to point at this thing called grief and do some unique things in that storytelling. So I think if you're looking for, those kinds of grief films that are dealing in that kind of reality, you mentioned a couple of them, but if you're looking to just feel sad and down and out about the world, we hear it all the time at Art House. There's films every once in a while we bring that just will leave you in a downer. So just stay in tune with Art House.
Yeah, for sure.
That's not why we exist, but that's just some of the films that are made, and we're bringing
everyone always loves to point out when you just bring in sad movies all the time.
We don't make the movies.
We don't make the movies, and I mean, it is still like, it's like I said, like, this one didn't hit me, but that is definitely one of my favorite genres, is to just, sometimes I just need to put in something that is going to hit me that hard, and I enjoy being able to have that sort of feeling. But and that's a good reason why these art films, because as emotional as Avengers Endgame can get, it's a whole different kind of
Oh, for sure. For sure.
experience.
So here, how I'm reading this is, as your boss, that your life and job is going so great that sometimes you just need to feel some negative emotions because everything else is just awesome. And
Yes.
so that's why you
Yeah.
watch these films.
And it's a
That's how I'm
good
choosing
thing
to
that
interpret
while I'm at work, I can watch a film that will give me those emotions.
it. Exactly. Let you know you're still alive and this isn't a dream because it's all so good.
Yeah.
So everybody, we said that we wanted to just clue you into what the plan is moving forward. We want to be honest with you and say that we have a target and we're moving towards that target, but our continual commitment to you and to our community is to do things safe and in a way that makes sense. And our hope and trust is that you continue to be safe and make decisions for you and your family and those around you for what is best. So this is not a call out for everyone in Billings, Montana to come to the movies. This is just an invitation to say, hey, we get to, because of the governor's orders, reopen and do it in a very safe and socially distanced way, and want to invite you, if that's something that you feel like you're in a state or a place for, we would love to invite you to come and be a part of it. So Brian, tell them what they need to know about the next couple weeks.
So this weekend, starting Friday the 15th and through the 17th, so just those 3 days, we are going to have a members only event at the Art House where we will be screening Balloon, which is a German film set in the Cold War. I think it's around 1979 or so, where true story of a group of people that built a hot air balloon in order to cross over the Berlin Wall, going from east to west Germany. So that will be coming this weekend for members only. So we'd love to be able to have you back. At Art House, we are only allowed to have 20 people per screening. So if you want to check that out, be sure to get there early or buy your tickets online so that you can check that out. And then starting on May 22nd, we will be having both theaters open and showing films. Again, we will be, probably doing 1 or 2 screenings a day for the most part. But May 22nd at the Babcock Theater, we will be opening Jurassic Park to bring everyone back to the Babcock and check out that. And great Steven Spielberg film to check out for that. So that will be Friday through Monday that we will be showing that, and then Tuesday off, and then Wednesday, Thursday as well. So plenty of opportunities to see that. We don't need everyone being there on Friday night or Saturday night. This gives you plenty of opportunities that you can catch it on a night that is easiest for you, and also so that we can keep those crowds to 200 max at the Babcock, so that we can still be socially distant and enjoy this film together.
The Babcock is a large theater, so we've had a lot of our members and some of you probably watching this reach out and say, "Hey, we could socially distance at the Babcock," and so that's what we're going to do. And we're readjusting some of our concessions and ticketing and all that stuff to make sure to keep everybody safe. So I hope that you make the decision that is best for you. If you have any questions on any of this stuff, please feel free to reach out to Art House, because we want to do everything we can to continue to bring great film, art, and culture to our city. So
also, I want to mention, I failed to mention earlier that for those of you that were interested in Balloon but are either not feeling safe to go out or are not a member and aren't really ready to commit to a membership right now, it is also going to be streaming at arthousebillings.com. You can find links there so that you can watch it at home. That way you still have an option to check out this film without needing to come out to see us as well. So.
Exactly. So, well, Mr. Ostrike, these Art House Rewinds have been fun. I've enjoyed watching you drink beer these last few weeks. Yep. It's been really, really great.
Yep.
So thank you to those of you that have been watching this live or doing the rewinds and watching them on YouTube or Facebook or through the podcast that you can find wherever you listen to podcasts. We're just so grateful. This stuff called community cinema is truly only exists because of you, the community, choosing to be a part of it and supporting the work that we're doing. So we're so excited for the future and what's ahead, and we'll continue to update you all through social media or at arthousebillings.com. if you need to go there. Other than that, everybody have a really great night.
Good night, everyone.